Okay, thanks everyone. So yeah, hi, I'm Annabel. I answered multiple things for that slide at the beginning because I'm a clinical psychologist working in South London in a community mental health team for adults with learning disabilities. I'm the research fellow for the Making Positive Moves project, which means that I've been involved in some of the research interviews and getting some of the data, and my job at the moment is mainly kind of looking at the data and working out what it means. I'm also a sister of my sister with learning disabilities who lives in supported living, who has never been in hospital but has had kind of multiple moves from supported living to others, and she wouldn't mind me saying that they've not always been the smoothest. So I'm kind of coming at this with from several angles really. But yeah, Pashtana and Louisa did a great job earlier of explaining a bit about the background to the project. So just to say where we're at again, this is looking at some of the things that people have told us at time one, which is all done now, and we've got everything that everyone said, and we've kind of thought about what that means. And then we're kind of towards the end of going back to everyone a year later, but we haven't looked at that data yet. So that isn't really included in the findings so far. So you'll have to watch this space for when all that comes out, but we're looking at that data now, and the idea is seeing what has changed for people over time. And already it's quite interesting because for some people not much has changed over time, and for them that's a really good thing because actually they've got some stability, they're not worried about moving again. For other people, they're talking about kind of making progress, maybe they've got a bit more independence than when we spoke to them before. So there's lots of different things change or not change over time and what that means for people. So hopefully that will come out in the future. So but I'm just going to talk today a little bit and try and stick to time. I've got my phone here because again, like Olivia and everyone else, there's so much to say, so I'll try and not drone on for too long. But we're just thinking a bit about what are the factors that have helped a move to be a success after moving as part of transforming care. And I really like this quote, so I've kind of put this as our title today. So I do what I have to do, then I'm like, wow, this just feels so much better than bloody being in there, you know what I mean? So it's kind of someone saying I have to do things to stay in the community, but even though I'm doing things and it's maybe not what I'd want to be doing, it feels better than being in hospital. So our participants have been telling us so much about life in the community after moving as part of transforming care. So Olivia's kind of touched on some of these things already, actually. Although they're different projects, we've looked at some of the same things that people have said, so there will be some overlap. But people have talked about wanting an ordinary life, doing the things that other people get to do around them. Sometimes that means fitting in with the expectations of society. So does that mean that you're a bit more valued if you have a job rather than being on benefits? Those are some of the queries coming up for people. People, again, like Olivia was saying about feeling safe. So that's both a bit like actually feeling a bit more safe in my home because it's less chaotic than the wards or the hospital I was in before. And also something a bit harder to kind of nail down what it means, but a bit about feeling safe in more relationships. So feeling that I can trust people, they know me, I know them, we've got this kind of good thing going on in our relationship. And some ideas about people's identity changing. So who am I? Who am I now? I'm in the community. Who am I having been through what I've been through? How do I make sense of myself in relation to the past, other people, the future? So there's a lot to say, and I'm barely going to touch on any of it today. But I think what I've tried to do for today is give a few key points answering these questions. This question of what are some of the things that have helped people stay in the community? So, sorry, I can't read the top thing because I've got the little bar. I'll see if I can remember what it said. So number one, first thing people said, so staff giving me the right support and a person-centered care plan. So I don't think there's anything like groundbreakingly new in what we're finding, but it is kind of hopefully from people's own perspectives, it makes sense that actually, yeah, if you're given the right support by your new staff team and some care that's person-centered, you'll be you know, things will go better for you. So I'm just going to read out some of these quotes that I think illustrate this idea. So do the staff do anything that's helpful now on a bad day? And Chris said, if I'm having a bad day, they just leave me to it. And when I'm ready to chat, about it. And then the interviewer said, and is that helpful, do you find? And Chris said, yeah, that's very helpful. So the staff are doing what Chris needs there. He's kind of made it clear that if he's having a bad day, he wants to be left alone for a little bit, and they do that, and he finds that really helpful. And Sabrina says something similar. So she said, they're helpful, the staff are helpful because they know when I need to talk and they know when I need to be on my own. Some people get to know me a bit more, so they know my sense of humour and everything. So again, it kind of implies that the staff are getting it right because they know when to give her that step in a bit more, and then they know when to step back a bit more, and she finds that really helpful. So point number 2 about what helps people stay in the community. People have been telling us that feeling accepted has been really helpful. So people understanding me in the context of my past and understanding my behaviours better. So those are things that we think people have been telling us help your community placement work. So Max was asked, what are the most positive things that you think have happened since you've moved out? And Max says, well, being with nice support people, and for them to understand that I've been through difficult times and they know that. And when they read my care plan, they don't judge people. They take people as they see them. I'm always scared when staff read my care plan because of what things I've done, but I can't really change. And staff say, well, you're in a better place now, Max, and that's it. So he feels that people are not judging him. They've kind of understood that this is where he's come from. This is what's happening for him. And that helps him to feel like he's accepted and is helping him in his current placement. So this is the same point. So I've just put the quotes on different slides because there's quite a few things to say. So again, the interviewer said, what things do you think has helped that change? So I think, sorry, I should have added in there, but I think it was about like things being better now. And Paul said, oh, being myself. And the key support person, so that was someone with him, helping him with the interview, saying, I think Paul's environment, once he's got used to the environment, he started to change, and staff understanding where he's coming from helps. And then a final quote. So Chris saying, if I make a mistake, the staff here will say to me, well, that was a mistake that you've done. But if I was in hospital, they'd do an incident form just like that and not let me go out for 3 days, for 4 days. So it feels like Chris feels like people understand that his behaviour has a context to it and are maybe trying to get to the bottom of it a little bit more, maybe thinking, well, you know, that was a mistake that's happened, but maybe let's think about what's happened rather than this. Maybe what happened in hospital was a very more of a like, right, instant form, you're not going out, punishment, kind of a very different approach by the sounds of things. So number 3, our third thing that people have been telling us helps is talking more to staff, talking more about what's bothering me. And I've put to staff in brackets because it is often with their new staff team, people are talking about this. So this interviewer asked Sabrina, what do you think has been the most helpful thing for you since you've moved to where you are now? Sabrina says, just chatting with support, having good times, spending time with my mum and dad, and yeah, everything's good. So Sabrina gets to spend time with mum and dad a bit more now, but also she's talking about talking with her support staff. This is where maybe the key support person had to help Mary understand what the interviewer was asking. So she's saying, what happens when it gets difficult? What's the management plan that you can have for that? And Mary says, I talk to staff. That's what I'll do. I'll talk to the staff. So it sounds like they've got a plan in place that Mary talks to staff and she finds that helpful. And Larry says this really simply. So what does it feel like talking more to staff? And Larry says, I feel much better and happier. Another thing that we've noticed people saying is, like Olivia said, some people do still have restrictions on their lives. Well, everyone still has restrictions on their lives, really, to be honest. And I suppose we all do. Everyone in the world kind of has to live within certain expectations of society or certain rules that are either written or unwritten about how we should behave and live our lives. But other people in our study have maybe restrictions that are put on them by the courts, if maybe they've come from a forensic route, which means kind of they've been in a legal process and come through that way. Or other people maybe have restrictions because of they're in supported living. They're someone with learning disabilities that doesn't necessarily get the full choices that the rest of us get in life. I thought this was a really interesting quote from Sabrina saying, well, they say I've got a choice, but I've told myself, listen to what they're saying. And there's a positive and a negative to that, because actually, like Olivia was saying, maybe there's something quite helpful about getting advice from staff. Maybe if you've not had practice of doing certain things, maybe the staff can be helping you to understand the new rules of life in the community. But it's also kind of does make me think that Sabrina's saying, well, I don't really have a choice about this, not in the same way that other people might. And TJ, who is someone who's kind of got court-ordered restrictions, saying, well, there's no point me sitting here moping and smashing my place up just because I can't do these things. I might as well just accept it and I just have to move on with it. So he's learning to live or tolerate the restrictions that he still has, and probably it kind of inferred that actually this helps him stay, because if he didn't accept it and did smash up his place, maybe he'd end up back in hospital. But actually accepting it as helping him to maintain his place in the community. I've got this other quote here for the same point. So what do you think is the most important thing? Paul says, having the staff I've got, the things I've got, I have to learn where I can go, where I can't go. I've got my conditions, and if I get that wrong, I'll go away. That's it. So the interviewer asked, what do you think it is about the staff that helps you not get into trouble? Paul said, they remind me. And what do they say? They say, behave, or you're going back to hospital. So this really kind of reminds me of some of the quotes that Olivia was describing earlier, but where, yeah, Paul again has conditions, so maybe by the court in terms of what he's allowed to do and not allowed to do, but maybe that being used as a bit of a threat by the staff to keep the behaviours in line. Number 5 is managing being on edge. So how you can kind of cope with some of the anxiety and worry that Olivia described earlier. And I've put in brackets, this is the kind of inferred bit, is without acting in ways that will find me back in hospital, because some of the behaviours that people describe are maybe things that would end up with them being back in hospital if they did use those things. So Max says, it's a totally new game is when you go into supported living. You're frightened of what the staff are actually thinking about you. It's like you're really scared, but until the staff get used to you, then you're on edge, and you're on edge all the time. So he talks about some quite strong feelings there about really being frightened and being worried about what staff are thinking, and feeling on edge and nervous. For the same point, TJ talked about having a recall back to hospital. So that's where if you are under conditions for your placement in the community and you did break them, that you might be recalled back to hospital. So having a recall back to hospital is such a big thing. And I suppose you work so hard to get out of hospital, you set yourself up, you have your flat and everything like that. And I suppose you try and do whatever you can for that not to happen, for you not to be recalled back into hospital. So yeah, you do have that fear. So he's kind of talking about, again, having a fear of being called back and having to cope with like Max said, having to cope with being on edge, but not using behaviours that might be seen as challenging enough to be recalled. And my final point, I think, number 6, was about people talk to us about how it's important to feel listened to and have their needs met. And again, I've put in brackets here, without the need for the behaviours that challenge, because that's the inferred part, that if you're listened to and have your needs met without using behaviours that challenge, you're more likely for your placement to be continuing in the community. So Pamela had talked before about running away from hospital and absconding from previous or trying to run away when she'd been locked up, understandably. So she said, the interview said, do you ever feel you need to run away from where you live now? I said, no. How come? Because I feel relaxed and I feel the staff believe me and they talk to me and they help me, you know what I mean? And it felt, I don't know, it felt really company. I really felt lovely that I'd got my freedom. I don't feel like hurting myself. So again, she feels like people are listening to her, they're talking to her, they're helping her. So she doesn't have that feeling of wanting to run away or hurt herself anymore. This quote, we had a bit of a debate amongst our research team actually whether to include this quote, but I have included it, even though it's quite a strong quote, just to end on a, well, I'll explain. So this is Lisa, who actually at the time, most people had, when we were interviewing them, had moved into their supported living and were there, you know, fairly happily, contentedly. Lisa actually had, at the point of these interviews, her placement in that community had broken down in that kind of language that we use in learning disability services. So she was actually living with her dad at the time. So, and they were trying to find somewhere else for her. So it was a really stressful, chaotic time for her. So the interviewer asks, I'm trying to understand for other people who've moved out of hospital and living in the community. So, you know, your experience right now is really important to understand why it's not worked this time. And Lisa said, I just feel like they don't listen and I'm still part of their, and I just basically want people to listen to me. And I'm like, oh, if I go for different scenarios, oh, if I cut my wrist open at dad's house, they won't let me stay there and they'll make me go back to the previous house. And I said, if they make you go to the house, I'll cut my wrist wide open and they'll maybe they'll listen basically and get me a new house if I don't die first. And yeah, so obviously that is a very strong quote, and we were kind of thinking, was this a bit of a negative note to be ending this part of our presentation on? But I suppose it is, we wanted to keep it in just to show that this is life and death for this person, you know, and for many people, this is not just a like, oh, find the right placement, but she feels so strongly that her previous placement wasn't the right one and she needs somewhere new, that this is kind of like her thought process around how extreme things are for her and when things have gone wrong. And I suppose it's kind of thinking that lots of things have gone right for the people that we've spoken to, which is good, but lots of things still haven't gone 100, you know what I'm trying to say, everything's gone 100% right and everything's rosy for everyone, because there's still a lot of work by the person themselves, by their families, by their support networks, by everyone around to make these positive moves continue.